Here we have the story of Jemima Puddle Duck, written by Beatrix Potter. This is a very, very fun story, and we will start it off promptly. What a funny sight it is to see a brood of ducklings with a hen. Listen to the story of Jemima Puddle Duck, who was annoyed because the farmer's wife would not let her hatch her own eggs. Her sister-in-law, Mrs. Rebecca Puddle Duck, was perfectly willing to leave the hatching to someone else. "I have not the patience to sit on the nest for 28 days, and no more have you, Jemima." "Oh, we would let them go cold. You know you would." "I wish to hatch my own eggs. I will hatch them all by myself," quacked Jemima Puddle Duck. She tried to hide her eggs, but they were always found and carried off. Jemima Puddle Duck became quite desperate. She was determined to make a nest right away from the farm. She set off on a fine spring afternoon along a cart road that leads over the hill. She was wearing a shawl and a poke bonnet. When she reached the top of the hill, she saw a wood in the distance. She thought that it looked like a quite safe spot. Jemima Puddle Duck was not in much habit of flying. She ran downhill a few yards, flapping her shawl in the air, and jumped off into the air. She flew beautifully when she had a good start, but she skimmed along over the treetops until she saw an open place in the middle of the woods, where the trees and the brushwood had been cleared. Jemima alighted rather heavily and began to waddle about in search of a convenient, dry nesting place. She rather fancied a tree stump amongst some of the tall foxgloves, but, seated on the stump, she was startled to find an elegantly dressed gentleman reading a newspaper. He had a black prick ears and sand-colored whiskers. "Quack," said Jemima Puddle Duck, with her head and her bonnet to one side. "Quack." The gentleman raised his eyes above his newspaper and looked curiously at Miss Jemima. "Madame, have you lost your way?" he said, and he had a long bushy tail, which he was sitting upon, as the stump looked somewhat damp. Jemima thought him mighty civil and handsome, and she explained that she had not lost her way, but that she was trying to find a convenient dry nesting place. "Ah, is that so, indeed?" said the gentleman with sandy-looking whiskers, looking curiously at Jemima. He folded up the newspaper and put it into his coat-tail pocket. Jemima complained of the superfluous hen. "Indeed, how interesting. I wish I could meet with that fowl. I would teach him to mind his own business. But as to a nest, there is no difficulty. I have a sack full of feathers in my woodshed. No, my dear madame, you would not be in anyone's way. You may sit here as long as you like," said the bushy, long-tailed gentleman. He led the way to a very retired, dismal-looking house amongst the foxgloves. It was built by wood and turf, and there were two broken pails, one on top of another, by way of the chimney. "This is my summer residence. You would not find my winter house so convenient," said the hospitable gentleman. There was a tumble-down shed at the back of the house made of old soap boxes. The gentleman opened the door and showed Jemima in. This sounds risky. The shed was almost quite full of feathers. It was almost suffocating, but it was comfortable and soft. Jemima Puddle Duck, rather surprised to find such a vast quantity of feathers, but it was comfortable, and she made a nest without any trouble at all. When she came out, the sandy-whiskered gentleman was sitting upon a log reading a newspaper. At least he had it spread out, but he was looking over the top of it. He was so polite that he seemed almost sorry to let Jemima go home for the night. He promised to take care of the nest until she came back the next day. He said he loved eggs and ducklings, and he should be proud to see a fine nestful in his woodshed. Jemima Puddle Duck said she laid 9 eggs in the nest, and they were green and white and very large. The foxy gentleman admired them immensely, and he used to turn them over and count them when Jemima was not there. At last, Jemima told him that she intended to begin to sit the next day. "I will bring a bag of corn with me so that I never need to leave my nest until the eggs are hatched, so they might catch a cold," said the conscientious Jemima. "Madame, I beg you not to trouble yourself with the bag. I will provide you with oats. But before you commence your tedious sitting, I intend to give you a treat. Let us have a dinner party, all to ourselves. May I ask you to bring up some herbs from the garden to make a savory omelet? Sage and thyme and mint and 2 onions and some parsley. I will provide lard for the stuff, lard for the omelet," said the hospitable gentleman with sandy whiskers. Jemima Puddle Duck was a simpleton. Not even the mention of sage and onions made her suspicious. She went around with the farm garden, nibbling off snippets of all the different sorts of herbs that are used for stuffing roast duck. She waddled into the kitchen and got 2 onions out of the basket. The collie dog met her coming out. "What are you doing with those onions? Where do you go every afternoon by yourself, Jemima Puddle Duck?" Jemima was rather in awe of the collie, and she told him the whole story. The collie listened, with his wise head to one side. He grinned when she described the polite gentleman with sandy whiskers. He asked several questions about the wood and about the exact position of the house and the shed. When he went out, he trotted to the village. He went to look for 2 foxhound puppies who were out at a walk with the butcher. Jemima Puddle Duck went up the cart road for the last time on a sunny afternoon. She was rather burdened with the bunches of herbs and 2 onions in a bag. She flew over the wood and alighted opposite to the house of the bushy, long-tailed gentleman. He was sitting on a log, and he sniffed the air and kept glancing uneasily around the wood. When Jemima alighted, he quite jumped. "Come into the house as soon as you have a look at your eggs. Give me the herbs for the omelet. Be sharp." He was rather abrupt. Jemima Puddle Duck had never heard him speak to her like that. She felt surprised and very uncomfortable. While she was inside, she heard a pattering of feet around the back of the shed. Someone with a black nose sniffed at the bottom of the door, then locked it. Jemima became very much alarmed. A moment afterwards, there were the most awful noises: barking, bailing, growls, howls, squealing, and groans. Nothing was ever more seen of that foxy, whiskered gentleman. Presently, Kept opened the door of the shed and let out Jemima Puddle Duck. Unfortunately, the puppies rushed in and gobbled up all the eggs before she could stop them. He had a bite on his ear. Cap had a bite on his ear, and both puppies were limping. Jemima Puddle Duck was escorted home in tears on account of those eggs. She laid some more in June, and she was permitted to keep them herself, but only 4 of them hatched. Jemima Puddle Duck said it was because of her nerves, but she had always been a bad sitter. And that's the story of Jemima Puddle Duck, and I would encourage you not to speak with gentlemen reading newspapers that have bushy tails.